As all of you know, you're here today to learn a little bit more about growth marketing. I sort of designed this session to meet you where you're at, meaning there's a little bit at the beginning that's more kind of foundational. And then as we grow, we're going to get into a little bit more of sort of the advanced topics, if you will, talk a little bit about some of the strategies and the tools, as well as some examples from in market where companies are actually leveraging growth marketing to drive user acquisition, drive leads, etc. As Diana mentioned, my name is Erin, and I have been in marketing for about 20 years. I didn't start, though, when it was growth marketing or digital marketing. I started way back in the day when it was called internet marketing. And in 2004, I mean, you have to think the landscape was so different. We were pre-social. There was just like a lot of things that were very different about the landscape. And we were learning a lot of things in those early days. I got really lucky that one of my first clients was a startup in Silicon Valley who was at the time selling an ebook and pulling 5 figures a month on this ebook sale, or the sale of the ebook. And I remember just like getting into his business and thinking that this was the coolest thing I had ever sort of seen. Again, remember now ebooks you can't even sell. Well, I mean, I guess you can on Kindle, but they're a little harder to sell these days. But back then it was this like new landscape. And I learned so much from the way that he was structuring his business and marketing the business and growing it, so much so that this business that he started as an ebook business ended up growing into a very large company, which we ended up getting acquired by Ancestry.com for about $100 million. So this was my first foray into the world of marketing and the world of business. I was really young and from a small town here in the Ottawa Valley. And so all of it was so, new but very exciting. And I instantly fell in love. So I've been doing that for a really long time. I ran my first company for about 14 years before joining a startup accelerator here in Ottawa. And then I moved from the startup accelerator into a B2B SaaS company where I spent the next year. And then I just recently resigned from that job and sort of parachuted out into the world and basically didn't line anything up specifically, but kind of obviously knew that I would likely land in marketing. And now I've got already within I think 11 days, I have 4 clients, and I'm back into, doing some fractional CMO work as well as some mentoring and consulting with startups and scale-ups. So that's a bit about me. A side note, I collect Lego. So I do Lego photography, and I have a daughter. So for what it's worth, some little personal background. Okay, so let's first dive into what is growth marketing. So again, I'm going to meet people where they're at. So some of you might have shown up. Maybe you have some experience in marketing. Maybe, growth marketing, you've been seeing it floating around. Maybe you're already dabbling in it. What will probably surprise some of you, or maybe not, is that, all marketing is growth. But there are some subtle differences when people begin to talk about like growth marketing specifically. So I'm going to cover those, but I'm also going to talk about, how to take anything you're doing today from a marketing perspective and almost apply a growth lens to it. Because I get that question a lot, which is like, well, isn't the whole purpose of marketing in general to grow? And it absolutely is. But growth marketing is a very specific discipline, and we're going to talk a little bit about that. Let me see. There we go. Okay, so this is a definition that I grabbed from UseProof. I think it's a really great one. Basically, it says that growth marketing is marketing 2.0. And I think the biggest differences we can pull out of this are, the A/B testing, optimization, really thinking through sort of the technical aspect of marketing. So it's about like analyzing everything you're doing in market and then trying to apply some experimentation to it, ultimately to drive more acquisition. So that could be lead gen, it could be user acquisition, whatever the case might be. You're essentially trying to continuously iterate on what you're doing to just get more results out of it. So that's kind of the difference. It really is an analytical role in many ways and an experimental role. So I would just like to take a quick poll. Is anyone that's tuning in right now, are you in a growth marketing role already today? Maybe we can and that'll give me a chance to also breathe, because you'll quickly learn that I talk very fast. So I need to take little moments to breathe, or else I'll end up passing out at my desk. Awesome. So it looks like we've got one in a growth marketing role? I'm going to write your name down because I'd love to maybe call on you down the road as well. Um, and for those of you that are saying no, maybe just also in the chat, maybe you could let me know, are you in a marketing role, or are you like, maybe just tell me a little bit more about your roles. And we could just take a quick second to do that in chat.
And I also see that Karen raised her hand, so maybe we can
excellent.
allow her to speak. I will allow her to unmute.
Sure, yeah, because I can't see the hand raising. So yeah, that'll be great, Diana, if you can.
Yep, Karen, we can hear you.
Hello.
Hi.
Hey, so I'm a part of a very specific role, so I'm an SEM analyst.
Oh, nice. Okay. Perfect. That is very helpful. You'll see as we go that what I love most about working with folks like yourself is for me, I would say I've mostly focused my career on a lot more of the organic growth side. So still applying growth marketing principles like optimization, experimentation, et cetera, but more on the organic side. And then I've always had a paid counterpart in every role I've ever had. They've primarily owned the paid side, which has been so nice to have both. So cool. So keep definitely sharing in the chat. I've got it up on my other screen so I can see it. Oh, nice. Okay, so you're a bookkeeper. We've got some analytics, digital marketing, growth marketing. Awesome. Okay, so let's keep going. Here we go. Oh, nice. Okay, so let's just quickly address an elephant in the room. So anytime I'm ever talking about growth marketing, the one thing I always hear is, Erin, how is it different than growth hacking, which is another very common term right now. It's very sexy, very popular. And the main difference, as you can see, it's outlined here. So a growth hacker really uses sort of creative low-cost strategies to both acquire and retain customers. And sometimes growth hackers are often like, you'll meet a growth marketer who's also called a growth hacker, but it is a little different in that a lot of growth marketers typically aren't looking for low-cost strategies. They, if they know that they can acquire a lot of companies by spending money through paid channels, they absolutely will, and especially if it's something that they can experiment with and deploy into market and test. So it's a little bit different. And then growth hackers stretch way out beyond just marketing. So growth hackers typically are looking at things like, how can they change a product to maybe do something a little bit different? How can they bolster in different tech that will again, bring in different features that will kind of grow the overall user base, let's say, whereas a growth marketer is much more focused on just the marketing channels. Is kind of the best way to describe it, although you will see people kind of interchangeably use those terms at times. Oh, cool. We've got businesses all over, local eye care clinic, chiropractic clinic. And the one thing I'll say, actually, beyond the growth marketing chat we're going to do today, I also, like I said, this is my third talk today. I'm also more than happy to share, with YSpace some of the other decks that I have on content marketing strategies, as well as kind of marketing fundamentals. I did both of those talks today, so happy to share those decks as well if folks would find those useful. Okay, so growth marketing tactics, they really stretch across the whole funnel. So they go everywhere from acquisition, an example of that would be paid digital, through to all the way down to revenue. And growth marketing, I would say, is probably one of the functions that's the most closely tied to revenue, whereas a lot of other marketing functions, for example, like PR or communications, may not be looking as specifically or they may not look specifically at revenue, because for them, they have different goals and metrics. But from a growth marketing perspective, you're often attaching all of the marketing activities that you're doing back down to that revenue. Like, is what you're doing increasing the lifetime value of a customer? And is it lowering, or at least keeping neutral, your customer acquisition costs, which is how much obviously it costs to acquire a customer. So growth marketing tactics show up across the whole funnel. One of the differences that you might see in other marketing roles is that they may only touch a specific piece of the funnel. So, you might have, for example, a marketer that's more focused on, let's say, referral programs or partnerships, and another that's more focused on acquisition from either a paid side or maybe an organic side. So growth marketing, though, full funnel. They own it all. They look at it all. They're optimizing it all, and really looking for those levers that they can, press and pull in order to sort of make more acquisition and conversions happen. So some of the differences, and I'm keeping an eye on the chat. Okay, so let's talk about what's important to growth marketing. Usually, they're looking at a few different things. So I think that first and foremost, they're obsessed with metrics. This is how they know if things are working. If they go out into market and they try something new and they're experimenting with it, they're almost always looking at like, how did that move the needle? Did we get more impressions? Did we lower our, cost per click? What did it look like? And I think that's an important thing to sort of call out. All marketers should be obsessed with data, but unfortunately, they are not all. Some of them don't live in that space. And there's some other things on the screen, so things like experimentation or strategic thinking. A/B testing is a really big one, and I put A/B testing and then followed it up with testing, because honestly, that's the whole basis of what growth marketing is. It's sort of like, imagine if you were about to do a Facebook ad, and you built your landing page and you went out into market with your Facebook ad. Maybe a non-growth marketer or a non-growth marketing mindset might just deploy that ad, leave it in market till the budget runs out, and then maybe they look at the data after, whereas a growth marketer will deploy the ad, and they're looking at both the conversion from the ad to the landing page, but also anything they can tweak on the landing page itself, maybe it's copy or content, that will really move the needle and increase those conversions. So those are some of the things that are important. I know, as I said, we have a growth marketer in the chat or in the session as well. Maybe you want to share a couple other things in the chat that are sort of very important to you in your role. But again, these are just some of the things. And I think for non-growth marketers, I think this is a great list to look at, to really think about, like, how can you bring in some of these elements of growth into the marketing that you're currently doing today, to just think about it a little bit differently, to do a bit more testing and experimentation, to try new things in terms of that out of the box thinking. There's some good learnings there. Yeah, so integrated marketing. And I think that's a great point, Kevin, is that, like, really it has to be something that stretches across all of your marketing. At every point across the funnel, it's got to be in there. And, oh, I see. Okay, so the question I think that you're asking, Sadia, is what do I mean by A/B testing? Is that the question that I think you're asking? Maybe just tell me in the chat if that's what you mean. Yes, okay. So A/B testing is basically when you take two instances of something. So let's say you have two pieces of copy. Maybe it's two headlines, or maybe it's two email subject lines, and you're actually testing those both out in market to see which performs better. So email is the easiest way to describe it. So let's say I'm about to send a broadcast out to my list through HubSpot or MailChimp or whatever. I would want to A/B test that subject line. So I'm going to send the same email to 50%, let's say, of the list, but 50% is going to get one subject line, and the other 50% will get another subject line. And that will let me know, okay, which one performed better, which one had more, opens, which one had more click-through rates. But you can A/B test, so taking version A and version B, you can test anything. You can test copy on a page, you can test images. The list is pretty much endless. It's used, like I said, a lot in email. And I would say most tools today have the ability to actually optimize your test in real time. So with email, for example, and if I think about HubSpot, they start deploying your email out to a select number of people. When that goes out, they sort of test, the two subject lines against each other. And then they're not sending it to the whole list at first. They're going to test a little bit of it, see which one comes out the winner, like which one's converting the best, and then they're going to double down on that one. So it's a very dynamic process. Okay, so there's a follow-up question. So if something has a higher click rate, would you double down on the same one that had the more click rate? Yeah, so like I said, most of the tools today that you might be using for this, like email and otherwise, they actually have the ability to do that dynamically. But if you're testing, let's say, copy on a web page and you're looking for conversions, it's a little harder to do that dynamically, although there are AI tools that are coming out that help you to do that. But let's say you're running like Google Optimize, for example, on a landing page and you're trying to test 2 headlines. There is a manual process to something like Google Optimize where you actually have to go in, look at the data, look at the conversion rates. They make some predictive guesses as to like which one's going to outperform the other. And then it would be up to you to actually apply the change. Whereas like I find more of the email platforms have evolved to a place where they actually help you dynamically do that. It's a bit of a difference. Okay, hopefully that helps. But if you have follow-up questions, let me know in the chat. I keep clicking away. All right, so common skill sets. Again, this is really, I mean, it's interesting. Like the list that's here is definitely a common skill set of a growth marketer, but it's also common skill sets of marketing in general. The difference though, let me just pop to the next slide, is that growth marketing definitely, I mean, I'm sure you've heard of the T-shaped marketer. So it's essentially you have sort of a wide breadth of knowledge, but you might go deep on one specific area, for example. Like if you're a social media marketer, but you also have a lot of other skills like copywriting and graphic design. Maybe you're even great at acquisition or conversion and optimization. You'd be wide, but then you'd be very deep on social media specifically. So these are just some of the skills that in 2020 were identified as being kind of like within the growth marketing sphere. But I would say that this isn't like a comprehensive list in the sense where there's a lot of different skills that growth marketers lean on, just like there's a lot of skills that marketers lean on in general. Okay, so typical tech stacks. Again, this is like it's a small list, but there are a lot of tools out there. I'm sure many of you can relate to having tech stacks that are quite large. I did just like call out a couple that you probably would come across if you're sort of looking for tools to do different things. So with analytics, for example, a lot of people just use Google, but there's also things like Amplitude or Mixpanel. I'm not going to go through the whole list because you have the slide in front of you, but there's lots of different tools. And I think the one thing I would say about tech stacks in general is it's really easy to want to find a piece of software to plug in to every single thing that you're doing. But you can get scrappy with it. You don't have to pay for a whole bunch of tools up front, especially if your company has a small budget. You can do a lot of things even in the Google suite, and it's free. There's a lot that you can do there from a data perspective. So I would say that, don't feel like you have to go out and like get every single one of these tools and start filling in the blanks is basically my point. Use Google to start and then build from there. And it obviously also depends on how robust your marketing system is as well. That'll define some of the tool choices. All right, so let's get into some of the strategies because this is kind of the fun part. I'm going to look at this from a sort of full spectrum of different strategies and different channels that can be optimized. Again, this isn't just under the lens of growth. I'm going to talk about growth, of course, but I'm also going to give you some just like best practices and things to think about if you're not yet doing that, that stretch even beyond growth, because I know there's a bunch of you in the session that are not necessarily growth marketers, and some of you aren't marketers at all. You're business owners. And so I think I want to make sure it's relevant and interesting for everybody. So we'll kind of talk about a bunch of different things. All right. Before I move on, though, let me know if there's questions in the chat or just give me a thumbs up that you're doing great. I'm going to take a drink because, like I said, I talk too fast and get very out of breath every single time I do talks. And maybe you could let me know in the chat, too, if you are a coffee drinker after 6 p.m. kind of person, or if you cut yourself off earlier in the day. I'm definitely a coffee until I go to bed kind of person, and it doesn't seem to affect my sleep. So I don't know, maybe I'm a little bit, coffee anytime. No coffee pests too. I know people like that too. Awesome. Okay, so let's dive in. You can keep going in the chat, but I'm going to dive into inbound. All right, so inbound is probably one of my favorite things. I absolutely love generating as much traffic as possible. I love generating as many leads as possible, and I love driving user acquisition and user growth. It's one of my favorite things to do. So let's just start by talking about a couple of the things that fall under inbound. So inbound, we're going to first look at content. Content is a great place for specifically even growth marketers to kind of play in and optimize, but non-growth marketers too. Content is by far one of my favorite aspects of marketing. I think it has an enormous amount of potential in terms of what it can do for you. And I'll explain why. So content is one of those things, especially owned content where you're putting it on your blog, let's say. Content has a compounding effect over time. So when you write a piece of content and you put it on your blog, that blog post is going to live on your site and in Google forevermore. It will be there for a very long time. And if you do your job right and you make it a little SEO friendly when you initially create that content, it's going to like actually work for you. Now, some of the ways to get the most out of it is definitely adding conversion elements to your content. So what I mean by that is having things in line with your content where people can subscribe to, let's say, a newsletter. Maybe they subscribe to an ebook that's related to the piece of content. Maybe it's even signing up for your product. If you're a software company, especially, you can embed that in there. But either way, content can be a fantastic driver of both traffic as well as, again, leads or users, depending on your purpose. And when I say users, for non-software companies, you can interchange that as well with customers. So if I say users, it's just because like my space I usually play in is software, but it doesn't mean that it's not, it's not interchangeable. It absolutely is. So other pieces of content that you might want to think about are things like social and podcasts, YouTube, white papers. And then, of course, there's earned media as well, which is basically things like PR, word of mouth, etc. So there's a lot that can be done with content. It is a beast. And like I said, I do actually have, I'm not actually going to try to attempt to go to the other PDF, but I do have a whole PDF that I will send over as well that can be shared that's on a content marketing flywheel. And it's going to give you everything you need to craft like a beautiful content marketing strategy. Because it's a whole, like I said, it's an area that I'm also passionate about. So I will share that after the fact as well. But let's turn our attention to some of the best practices, especially for content. So I think when you're starting to create your content, whether it's, again, on any of the platforms I mentioned, really start by thinking about the goals you have for that content. It should do something for you. It shouldn't just be something that you're posting because someone said you should post 2 to 3 times a week. Really think about like how you can set a goal for that piece. Is it going to convert folks to leads? And if so, how many leads do you want, to hopefully convert from that type of content? If it's going to drive user acquisition, how many users are you hoping that it converts? So set some goals that'll really help motivate you as well to kind of keep going on some of those, content sort of pushes, because it is a lot of work, but you really want it to be something that works for you. I think also choosing your content channels is important. Everybody asks me, how do I choose channels? I would say absolutely choose wisely. You cannot be everywhere successfully unless you have a really large marketing team and a lot of people to support that. So, for example, if you only pick your blog and Twitter and LinkedIn and maybe YouTube, that's great. You don't have to go and be on TikTok and Clubhouse and Dispo, which I actually just got on right before this call. It's another social platform if you haven't seen it. But you don't have to be everywhere, I think, is the main takeaway for that. A couple other goals: decide on the type of content that you want to share. Is it going to be a video? Is it going to be audio based? Will it be written, etc.? And then the biggest thing especially on the growth side, is the distribution of your content. It needs to be well distributed. You have to have a bit of a distribution engine behind it, and then analyzing the results of the content. So things like page views, conversions, how is it doing? Are people sharing it? That's another great metric as well, is like, is it a shareable piece of content? Okay, so those are some best practices. And I'm going to share with you an example from the wild. So Zapier, which is a company that basically does, they integrate tools together, is essentially what they do. And at the same time, because they do integrations, they're actually sort of an invisible tool, meaning that once you have the two tools you're trying to integrate together, once you have the integration in place, Zapier kind of falls to the background. It's going to do its job. It's going to send the data, between the two tools. But ultimately, you're not using Zapier day to day the same way you would use like an Asana or Monday for project management. So they knew this. They knew that they were an invisible tool, and so they looked to see, how they could still acquire users, specifically through content. So they started writing about things like how to quickly append text to a note in Evernote from your browser. And even though the content is not about Zapier, it's actually about Evernote. In the blog post, they embedded the use of Zapier. So they basically showed people who were in market searching for that specific tool, or that specific, I should say, end result. They showed how Zapier could do that. So I think it's a really great example of content being used in the wild, specifically for growth. And I want to say that I think Zapier's, in a recent blog post that I read, I think they said they generated 60,000. I want to say it was 60,000 either impressions, or maybe it was even signups, based on that piece of content alone, like that style of content. So it was a really huge driver of growth for them. And I think it's a great lesson that content can actually work really well for you. Okay, so let's look at the paid side. Actually, before I move to the paid side, any questions on the content side? Wait a second. You have to be fast with your typing fingers. No? Okay, then I'm gonna keep going. Let's look at the paid side then. So paid covers a whole bunch of different things. There's things like paid search, paid social. There are, you can even sponsor a newsletter ad inside of someone else's newsletter. Fun fact, that actually worked really well for us when I was at Fellow. We sponsored a couple of newsletters that were within our space, and we weren't sure what to expect. Again, it was a total experiment, total growth marketing sort of initiative. And we actually ended up getting a lot of results from sponsoring this newsletter. We were able to just get a little spot in the bottom of it. We chose a newsletter that was very targeted to our demographic, and it produced a lot of results. So that can be a really great option. When you think about paid, it doesn't always need to be like advertising on Google and Facebook. It could actually be also picking these niche outlets where you can go and place an ad and actually get a lot of results as well, that are much more highly targeted and a lot less experimental. And then finally, podcast ads. Same thing, pick some podcasts that are in your space, and sometimes like you'll see that you'll have great results with that as well. Keeps clicking away on me. Okay, so there's going to be people who can speak to the paid side far better than I can. So I'm going to leave this spotlight. Again, where I play, the space that I love the most has always been on the organic side, primarily as a result of not having budget. So in most of the companies I've worked in, they've been startups. They don't have a lot of marketing budget. They don't have a lot to spend. I've always had to get like more growth hacky, or think like a growth marketer through things like, organic methods. So the blog, social, like our content in general, those kinds of things. I've always had to think about it that way. It's just been like I said, side effect of having no money to spend. I don't know if anyone else in the chat can relate to that, not having a budget, but very common. So I think what I do want to leave you though, with, you can relate to the low budget solutions. Yeah, you almost have to get scrappier, right? You have to, to use your word, get crafty. You have to get a little scrappier, and you have to think about like, how can you use the things you have, until you have budget. And then you can get, start pouring more money into ads and things like that. Oh, I'm interested in organic, but it seems like it's expensive, but it's simple with paid other than organic. So I get what you're saying. It can be a lot more complex to set up things like organic marketing for sure. Especially if you think about things like a content marketing strategy or even the investment in a social strategy. That takes time, it takes resources, which do cost the business money. I think the one caveat that I would say is before you go out and do paid ads, make sure the foundation that the people that you're going out to, make sure where they're coming back to, whether that's your website or your landing page, make sure it's strong. Make sure it's optimized for conversions, that it has like on point language that's attached to the ad that they're seeing in market. It's all too often. I mean, I just started working with, a couple companies, and one of the companies I started working with is driving all of their ads to their homepage. Now, you might say to me, okay, that's not so bad, but driving ads to a homepage is actually it's messy. And the reason it's a bit messy is because when someone lands there, there's typically not just one call to action or one conversion element. There's usually multiple on a homepage. And a homepage is naturally designed to be a lot more like it's casting a wide net, versus if you send them to a very targeted landing page, there's usually only one CTA, maybe it's duplicated, but there's just one thing you're trying to get them to do. And the language, the copy, and the content and everything is usually much more handcrafted to the landing page or to the actual ad. So it's, they'll see an ad in market, they click through, the landing page is very on point, it's very targeted. And that's likely to drive higher conversions than if you just send them, willy-nilly over to your homepage and hope they figure it out. Because people will get distracted. They'll start clicking around your resources, your services pages. They'll look at a whole bunch of your content, and you might think like, well, that's actually great. But the more clicks that people do throughout your website, the higher chance you have of just losing them. So if you're going to do ads, I think it's great. Just be very targeted and systematic about your approach, so that you can also test everything in market. Okay, so Olivia asks, as you mentioned, with so many different old and new platforms, how do you determine the right success metrics or objectives? Yeah, that's a great question. So social is a little interesting because on social, you have vanity metrics. So vanity metrics, are things like, for those of you not familiar, would be things like your follower count. It really doesn't matter. I mean, yes, I realize having a large following is a very nice thing to have, but it actually doesn't really matter if that same large following doesn't actually engage at all with your content or click through to the things that you're posting or sharing. So I think the more important metrics specifically for social are things, definitely engagement is a high one. And then, conversions is an important one. You want to track to see if like the things you're sharing on social are generating leads or customers. But at the end of the day, social media should not be solely about user acquisition or customer acquisition. It should actually be about providing an equal part value and an equal part promotion. So I like to do like an 80-20 split where 80% of my social media is only providing value, providing content, helping out my target audience. And the other 20% might be more promotional. So maybe I'm asking them to sign up for something and give me their email, or maybe I'm asking them to actually make a purchase of some sort. So when it comes to the metrics, I would say definitely engagement will tell you that your social platform is actually there. Like the people are there and they're paying attention and they like what you're posting. And so that's one thing, but choosing the actual channels or the accounts that you participate in, it boils down to audience. So if you're in a B2B company, you might have a lot more success on Twitter or LinkedIn than you would if you're in B2C. Although I've seen a lot of B2C brands also use Twitter and figure that out as well. But it really is about just figuring out like, where do your people, the people you serve, your customers and your prospects, where do they hang out? And then choose based on that alone. And again, just like going back to it, you don't have to be everywhere. Because TikTok, for example, is not going to work for every business. You could make it work, for sure. I'm sure there's lots of creative people in the room. You could definitely make it work. But for some businesses, there's just going to be certain platforms that perform a lot better. All right. Oh, you're welcome. So there's another question of, is there a way we can do the same with organic marketing? So I think you're referring back to sort of the targeted ads coming back to landing pages. Absolutely. So if you're on social and you're out in the world and you're sharing content, you're going to have a much better success rate if you're sending people from even social organically back to a landing page versus just sending them back to your homepage, because then they have to go figure it out. They have to figure out like what you want them to do, what they're supposed to do, what that next step action is. But with a landing page, so when they get there and there's very few options, it's really clear what the next step is. And you're probably going to have a much higher success rate of getting them to do that. And I would say organic is like one of those things that I think it gets often overlooked because it does seem like it takes a lot more time. But it has so many compounding effects as well, which I just love. Anyway, there's just so many good things about it. And to put it into perspective, so this month, from a personal brand perspective, if any of you are curious about that, so this last month, I did a concerted effort. Like I put time, energy, and effort into doing at least 3 tweets per day on my own personal account. It was just something I wanted to try. It was all value add, mostly on marketing. And as a result of doing that, I had 2 million organic impressions on just my tweets from my personal account in the last 28 days. So organic is like so I would say that it's like the underdog a little bit. It's not as glamorous because it does take a bit more time, but it has that like ability to compound over time. Whereas paid, if you rely solely on paid, you're going to be putting money into it all of the time. Not to say it's bad. I actually, I've always used it. It's just I think you need a blend. Okay. So just an example on success in the market with paid ads. I think this example from Segment's really interesting. Basically, Segment increased conversions to their tool. They're basically a data platform. They increased conversions with retargeting. So they realized that all the people that were visiting their website, and there was obviously folks visiting a whole bunch of different pages. They started in using Facebook and Twitter ads. They started retargeting those website visitors with very specific content. So I've got them listed out here. So for visitors who went to their documents, which they assumed that meant that they were likely more technical. They then sent API related ads. So the messaging in the ads was very related to that. And to anyone who looked at pricing, they were sending free trial ads. So it's just a great example of like how retargeting specifically the people that were at your website and you retarget them using ads. That's actually a really useful way to do it. It's what we actually had the most success even at Fellow, the company I was just with prior to going out on my own. We had the most success with retargeting from a paid acquisition perspective, simply because getting a cold user to sign up for your tool is a little harder than getting someone to sign up for it that's already been to your site. So something to think about. David asks, can LinkedIn be used for growth marketing? Yes. But I want to make sure that I say something. So there's a lot of my friends that I have who are in, they call themselves growth marketers. And they're kind of like sit in between like growth marketing and sales or growth marketing and biz dev. They use LinkedIn, and I'm sure you've all received the DMs from folks who are just sort of like sending you messages and following back up again and following back up again. I think that like it probably works maybe over time, but I just find it really annoying as a recipient of those messages. So like I think it can be on the paid ad side on LinkedIn, absolutely, because LinkedIn and their ads, albeit they are expensive to run, they can be very highly targeted, right, to a specific job title, for example, or specific companies. So LinkedIn for ads is good, especially if you get someone who really hands down understands that well. But from an organic perspective and a networking perspective, I think you need to be a little careful. I wouldn't use it too much for like anything growth hacky or growth marketing wise, although a lot of people do. From a posting perspective, both from your personal account or business, it's actually a great platform for posting and getting a lot of viral posts. It seems like everyone on LinkedIn, though, has like these amazing stories from their careers that are happening all the time. I mean, I think, it's kind of, I think becoming a little cliche that I'm sure you all know what I'm talking about. There's the people who post like one line at a time in their paragraphs, but it's successful for some. So I think folks will keep doing it. As a service-based bookkeeper, what do you suggest to use? Facebook, LinkedIn, Twitter, Instagram. So I think what I would say to you is spend a bit of time thinking about like who the customers are for your service-based bookkeeping business. Are they startups? Are they small businesses themselves? Do you find that there's any trends in the types of businesses that engage with you? And if so, I would think about like where do those people hang out? You could probably for your business make most of those platforms work. Maybe Instagram, maybe I'm sure you still could. You could provide like bookkeeping tips and like little anecdotes and things. But yeah, I would just think about more, like a little bit more about your audience. And without knowing that, it's a little hard to just sort of recommend anything specific. And from the Facebook side, so I might be in the minority here, and please weigh in the chat if you feel like this. I feel like Facebook is dying on the vine. Like I just feel from a page perspective and a profile perspective, like I don't know a whole lot of people anymore that are over there, except like my mom and my grandma, and maybe my dad. Like the older generation. I don't even think like pages aren't getting the same organic reach that they used to get. So I don't know. I'm almost out on Facebook, meaning like I don't have any Facebook pages there that I manage from a business perspective or even for myself. And I don't really log into my profile except to like cross post my Instagram photos for my family to see. And even then, I actually don't agree with cross posting most of the time. And I do it to Facebook because I just like honestly don't care. However, for whatever reason, Facebook ads are still working. Even for like things like B2B, which is anyway, baffles me because I'm like, who is still on this platform? So it's still useful for, I think, a certain demographic. And I agree, Jenna, I do also think Instagram might be next on the chopping block. All of their UI and UX changes recently, honestly, for me, have killed the platform. It's like, I don't know if anyone else feels like this. It's hard to post something now. Like all the steps you have to do, like plus sign, and then figure out, do I want to post a story or reel? I know it's actually simple. It's like 2 clicks, but just like it broke my brain when they added the shopping cart option where the, photo sharing used to be. So not a fan. And I'm also obsessed with TikTok right now. So I really like it, both from a posting perspective and a consumption perspective. From a posting perspective, I'm sharing like little marketing anecdotes on there. I've only just started, so don't go look at my account and think like, wow, Erin, you really knocked this out of the park, because I did not yet, but I'm playing around with it to figure it out. And Dee says Clubhouse is awesome. I agree. Clubhouse is, well, okay. Actually, I have an opinion on Clubhouse. It was awesome when I first got on, and it was small. The rooms were intimate, and like you had a lot of conversation. It was great. It has changed a lot now that it's kind of more widely available. However, I do think it's a really great way to create interactive events that are just a little more accessible for people than getting on a Zoom call. I mean, we've all been on so many Zoom calls, and I know we're on one now. So I don't want to disparage the Zoom call, but yeah, it's just a nice chill way to like have this live podcast in your ear. I listen to them quite a bit. Yeah. And yeah, I know it's a pain point about it not being on Android for sure. Okay, so obviously we can get very excited about social. The acquisition portion of this, I mean, we've talked about some of this already, so I'm not going to like repeat myself in great detail, but let me go over just a couple of different things. We've talked about acquisition channels already through like content marketing, as well as the other channels. So again, just making sure that we have that listed there for you. But I wanted to show you this really fast. So this is essentially kind of like the way that you would move strangers to promoters. So this is it's like a funnel, but it's actually flat. So it's not like, shaped like a funnel, but it is still a funnel. And basically this is just to give you the visual that when you're thinking about going out in market, the whole goal is to move strangers to promoters. And these are the different things that you want to do along the way. So in the strangers/visitors section, you're trying to attract them. Then you move into converting them, actually turning them into leads. Then you close them into customers. And then the delight phase is sort of where you turn them into almost ambassadors or champions of your company. So I'm sure you've all seen it, but if you haven't, I wanted to make sure you saw that. And then there's also another one that's a little bit more, I would say, growth marketing oriented in the sense where it's still similar. So it's awareness, consideration, decision, which is, other stages of the funnel. And then where you might actually identify like who these individuals are along that journey. So again, just some visuals to help you kind of understand how you're moving people through this sort of overall buyer journey or customer journey. David asks, is TikTok more for C2C or where will you market for B2B? So it honestly depends on your audience. At Fellow, we had an audience that was, so Fellow is a meeting management tool, like a meeting agenda app. Our primary audience was managers inside of companies. And managers, they have a whole bunch of different, sort of traits. And it's not really one demographic. Like you have a bunch of different people, obviously, that are managers. So for us, because we did reach folks that were young and, as well as old, we actually took an approach of trying to experiment on a lot of different platforms, which is exactly the opposite of what I told you to do. We did try to experiment on them. We had the most success, I would say, on LinkedIn, followed by, I would say, Twitter. And then from there, I think our Instagram and our TikTok accounts helped add some personality to the brand. So we tried to think of the brand as a whole at Fellow, even though we were in the B2B space, we tried to think of it as like a media company. And so what could we do that actually connected with people in an entertaining way, even though, B2B is traditionally pretty boring. It shouldn't be, but it traditionally kind of is. And then the way people approach like even the channels or the content can kind of be a bit boring. So I think TikTok can work for B2B as well. You just have to get creative about the content you share there, and then just know the audience that exists on TikTok if you serve that audience. All right, let's keep going through some slides. Okay, so I wanted to give you this example of Clearbit. The reason I share this example is that sometimes growth marketing, as I was saying earlier, especially if it's kind of like blended with growth hacking, can kind of lean into the tech side. And so in this particular case, Clearbit was actually creating these free APIs for developers, which is their primary target audience, basically to encourage them to play with Clearbit. And then they ended up releasing a free logo API on Product Hunt and got 60,000 views to it. And just by creating these APIs and inviting developers to play, which most developers love to play, they were able to drive a lot of user acquisition. So I put this under acquisition because I want you to also think about the fact that sometimes it's not necessarily about just using like a tried and true channel. Sometimes it's not about just doing the same old, but it's really about thinking like, what could you do that's a bit different for your specific audience? And in this case, it was creating these APIs. I also want to call out one quick thing about Product Hunt. Maybe in the chat, you can let me know if you've ever launched something on Product Hunt before. It's mostly for products, obviously, it's in the name. It's a great place to launch new features or new products that are coming out. But a little underutilized element is launching ebooks on Product Hunt. So anytime we created ebooks at Fellow, we always launched them on the platform. And just from Product Hunt alone, we would end up getting about 1,000 to 2,000 downloads of the guide just from Product Hunt. So if you create guides and you're creating ebooks and you think it would be something that the Product Hunt community would like, consider launching it there. We've always had pretty good success with that. Okay, so landing pages. Thankfully, I talked a little bit about this already, so it shouldn't be too new. But I wanted to include some fundamentals. Again, we talked a little bit about it. But basically, if you're going out in market and you're sending people back to a page, make it consistent is the key message if you take nothing else away. And then, focusing your visitor's attention with a clear headline, one call to action, maybe again duplicated, but just one is great. And then I like to use landing pages to break out things like use cases. At Fellow, we had one for one-on-one meetings, we had one for team meetings, and one for remote meetings. And we were able to kind of test like which meeting type drove the most amount of acquisitions. So you can kind of think about both user and traffic segmentation from a landing page perspective. For those of you not familiar with what a landing page is, it's essentially a page on your website or sometimes off your website, but usually on, that is essentially a lot of content and copy. Maybe not, maybe sometimes they're short, but they have one purpose. So it could be to drive people to your product or maybe to download an ebook, but you're really honing people in on one action, which is the primary purpose of that. I'm not going to go over this in full detail, just given the time, but it is a great list. So if you want to come back to this, if you're working on your own landing pages, consider this like a list that you could go through to sort of check off, like, do you have all of these different elements? All right, so I'm going to show you 3 examples of landing pages. So this one is from Lyft, and it's an application page. And as you can see, it's very simple. You land here. The thing I would say that I wouldn't do if I were them is I would take off that top navigation. So where it says cities, drive, blog, partners, etc., I would actually remove that. That's a distraction. And if the primary goal is to get people to apply, I would just take that off. So that would be my one kind of suggestion for them for that page. Muck Rack on this one, the thing I liked about this one is that sometimes if you're serving multiple demographics, you can send them to a landing page like this and have them choose like which bucket that they're in, especially if you have like, I work with a lot of clients that have a double-sided marketplace, so they serve 2 audiences essentially, and they have to fill up both. This can be a great way to quickly identify like which of the 2 are you. So I kind of liked the style of that one. And then this one's a really simple one. So I actually like this a lot. They are a little light on copy. They could put a little bit more of a description in here. But at the end of the day, you can see it's really simple. It's like sign up and start coding in seconds. That's the call to action. It's clear and it's super, super easy. Okay, so email nurturing. How many of you in the chat are doing email marketing to some degree? It could just be something simple like a welcome email. But maybe let me know. And if you don't mind, maybe add a little bit of detail in terms of like what you're doing with it. So Devin's doing email marketing. Anyone else? Oh, okay. I was gonna say maybe it's just Devin, the lone email marketer. David hates email marketing. You're not alone. There's a lot of people that hate it. Yeah. Okay, so let's just talk a little bit about it, because honestly, for me, email marketing is not about like buying a list and then spamming them. Like that is not what email marketing is really, in my view, for. Email marketing for me has always been about building relationships. It replaces, in some ways, the manual follow-up that I would like to do with prospects, if I had all the time in the world. And it also provides them with a lot of value and pushes them through a funnel. And that's why we call a lot of the things that people do around email marketing funnels. So just some best practices, I would say same thing, leveraging targeted content, focusing on multiple touch points. So at Fellow, anytime someone downloaded one of our ebooks, we instantly put them into an email marketing funnel where they were able to get dripped a bunch of different emails that all provided them with more value related to that initial ebook, with the purpose somewhere along the way, usually maybe after like 7 touch points, maybe less, then we would try to get them to actually sign up for the product. So it's really about building that relationship with them. And there's lots of different tactics. Honestly, we could spend a whole hour just talking about email marketing on its own. But I definitely recommend that you at least put in a basic nurture funnel, which is nurturing the lead along the way to get them to that close section, or the close kind of stage. We already talked about this. A/B testing subject lines for emails is really super simple, especially with a lot of the technology that exists today. So I highly recommend doing that. And they can be highly optimized. So when you set up a funnel, I think what most marketers miss is that they put in place a funnel and then never look at it again. I recommend putting the funnel in place and then at least checking back in on the funnel, on maybe, let's say, a monthly basis, more if you have time, but monthly is great. And then just look at things like your open rates, click-through rates, et cetera, and then try to tweak those emails, even with just minor tweaks, to see if you can't improve some of those stats. And an example from the market. So Groove ended up turning sort of high churn around using targeted email. So in a lot of software companies, one of the things that they deal with is customer churn. So people that were on the platform and decided to leave for whatever reason. And Groove ended up sort of taking that into account. They knew that they had a lot of churn. And so they set up a re-engagement funnel, which went back and talked to anyone who had left Groove, but didn't like unsubscribe. You don't want to email those people, but the folks that had left, and re-engage them to try to get them back on the platform. And that actually worked really well with them, and it drove a lot of reactivations on some of their accounts. All right. Any questions on email marketing? I know we're doing high-level overviews. Each of these sections could be their own sessions, really. But I think the summary for you on email marketing is you're going to use it as a blend. So you're going to have your funnels, which are definitely set up and they're automated, but you'll also be using emails to do things like dedicated blasts. So you might send out like a single email to a list about a specific offer, or you may even be sending out a newsletter on a regular basis, or you might also folks use it for retention as well. So to try to keep your users or customers on the platform, or even to sometimes cross-sell or upsell to get your customers to do more with you. So lots of ways you can use it, but it is something you should just think about, particularly from a growth perspective. All right, so some referral programs. Referral programs are often called affiliate programs. That's kind of like an old school way to call them, I would say. I think most people today are calling them referral programs. But essentially, what you want to do with these is identify your best customers and then try to incentivize them to share your business. So maybe that is rewarding them for a referral that they can make to someone else. Maybe it's actually giving them swag. It doesn't need to be, let's say, monetary value. But basically, you just want to set up a program that allows people to share what you're doing with the rest of the world. A prime example would be Dropbox. How many of you shared Dropbox to get more space? I mean, I know I did that, but maybe you can let me know in the chat if you've used Dropbox's referral program to get more space. Olivia did. I think I ended up sharing it and got to the point where I had a terabyte of space on my Dropbox. I'm pretty certain. So referral programs can be great incentivizers for folks to actually generate more referrals to you. A few things that you can do is just to add a referral note to your products or even to your emails. Those emails that initially go out welcoming someone to your company, whether it's a product or a service, it can be a great place in there to just put like a PS, like, hey, we'd love it if you referred us to a few friends. And then find some way to reward both sides, the referrer and the referred. Definitely say thank you if you get referrals. And you can also incentivize other companies to also refer business back to you. So that's another option. And just to show you an example, so this is Yesware. So they do get, you can get 100 free tracking events for every person who signs up using your link. If anyone's a Good Food subscriber, I think HelloFresh might do it too, but Good Food is the master at referral programs. Every single time I get my Good Food box in the mail, there is probably a stack of paper, which is probably bad for the environment. Not probably, it is. But they always send me these referral coupons that I can then pass out to all my friends. Every box. I mean, they're great at it. So they figured it out. But you can do it even obviously in software and in other products as well. PayPal's referral program was actually a really neat example. They paid people to sign up for PayPal at the very beginning. They gave them a free $20 for signing up right into their account. And then they also started to pay people for referrals as well. And this actually allowed them to grow to 5 million daily users in just a few months from a referral program. And the other example that I love to share is Hotmail. So when Hotmail first started, they were sending, if you remember, any email you sent out to your friends had a little like sent with Hotmail at the bottom. That ended up driving a lot of Hotmail's early growth, which is like super fascinating. Today, you'll see it a lot where people will say like powered by, and there's like a little embedded kind of logo, that they'll attach to things that their customers might be engaging with. So you'll still see remnants of that today. And then Twitter is another example. So I think if you've, I don't know if they're still doing it, but it used to be that when you signed up for Twitter, they would instantly suggest 10 new accounts to you. And what Twitter realized is that by doing that, by introducing those 10 new accounts right away, that you wouldn't end up in Twitter with an empty feed, and therefore you'd likely see the value a lot more quickly and stick around. So that network effect was huge for them. They grew enormously by doing that. And if you can think about your own product or service even in that way of instantly plugging people into the value, it can be really great for your business. And LinkedIn did it too. So LinkedIn added the question of where did you used to work when people were signing up? And as a result, people instantly became connected with all of their colleagues and alumni at schools. And that ended up making their users stick around for a lot longer. Okay, we're almost at the end. We're getting close to the end of the examples. And I'll pause here, get a temperature check as to how everyone's doing. Maybe you can just type in the chat, let me know. We have 9 slides left. Thanks, Armando. You're actually one of the ones I see on my screen throughout the session. Yeah, I've been watching when I can at the bottom, when I'm not like completely out of breath, because I love to share so much information, and my biggest problem is like not overwhelming everybody. But yeah, you'll have lots to come back and review in the slides as well. Great. Okay, so let's get through these next slides so we can have more interaction and I can actually hear from some of you. So let's just quickly look at how you can optimize traditional marketing models. So a lot of, even your traditional methods can be very heavily benefited by growth marketing. So if we think about experimentation and A/B testing, you can apply this to almost everything. A/B testing might be a little more challenging depending on what you're doing, but almost everything can be tested. So Tinder is a great example. So Tinder actually did this really non-scalable. It's really not scalable for them. But they basically invested in a tour of sororities and fraternities at different colleges to manually recruit signups. So they would show up and they'd actually get people to sign up for their app while they were standing right beside them. And then what ended up happening after that is that all of the other users instantly saw value, because when they got on, there was people in their local area already waiting in the app to, accept dates. So that really worked well for them, but again, not scalable. And okay, customer retention. I mean, I know I only provided you with one example of how to like take a traditional method of, boots on the ground and actually think about it from a growth perspective. But what I would say is everything we've talked about, again, has sort of a paid component, an organic component, and you can apply the principles to just about anything. Okay. You can tell that this is like nearing the end of the day. My breath is almost gone. So number 7, customer retention strategies. So it's much more expensive. I think we all know this, but it's much more expensive to get new customers, right? So you really want to keep the ones you have. And this is where customer retention comes in. So what we're going to talk about here is just some things like an onboarding program, customer feedback loops, advisory boards, customer education program. When I was at Fellow, we did a lot of really interesting things. We held master classes for our users where we kind of showed them some of our like pro features, answered questions, pulled them together as a community. Some of those things were really great for retaining customers. And you might think to yourself that, okay, this kind of stretches more into like a customer success role. But when you're in a growth marketing role, you're trying to think about anything you can do to drive more acquisition and drive more growth. And one of the ways you can do that is actually within your existing customer base. So if you go into the customer base and you're doing a great job, they're going to become promoters. They're going to go out into the world and they're going to share the tool, share your service. And so you really want to be thinking about like, how can you apply the marketing mindset even just to the customer side as well. And those are some ideas. And then I just like to throw in a couple examples of brands that are actually engaging with folks on social, because I think it's so special when it happens. And so many people are literally only trashing brands on social. But I think the brands that do it really well, where they're listening and they're paying attention, they're leading with empathy, they're using social as a means to connect with their customer, they see really great results. So just an example from Tesco. Here's another example where basically they are rewarding their existing customers. So it's that referral program element again, but there is the reward there. And then Amazon Prime is such a great example of providing your customer with a subscription model that actually helps improve their experience, provide them with steep discounts for using your platform, thus rewarding them. And also it just like, there's just a lot of benefits when you're a Prime member, and people are more likely to talk about that with their family and friends. And the last point I'm going to make is that Facebook actually increased their 1 week retention with a North Star. So another thing to think about when it comes to customer retention is what's the metric that you're going to measure. And for Facebook, they realized that the clearest indicator of retention for them was whether or not users connected with 7 friends within 10 days. And if they did that, they were much more likely to stay on the platform because, again, they're now immersed with their friends, they see their content, and it worked really, really well for them. So great example of retention. And I'm going to end with this. So there are tons of ways to do growth marketing. I think the things I want you to leave with, though, is it's definitely about out of the box thinking. It's about experimentation and optimization, but ultimately it boils down to a lot of the marketing foundations and fundamentals as well. It's about doing those things, but just having a little bit of a different mindset. So that's the end of my talking portion. I'd love to do a little bit of interaction with you all if you've got questions or want to talk about anything I've covered or anything I haven't covered as well.
And if anyone would like to say something, we can definitely unmute your mics. Just raise your hand. So under reactions, you'll see raise hand, and you can do that as well.
Yeah, and I'd love to hear your voices. I can stop sharing for this portion, actually. Like, stop sharing my screen. Then we can go to squares. Armando, are you the only one with your video on? Not to put you on the spot, but I'm like... Hello.
Hey, just a quick question.
Yeah,
when
sure.
you said that the companies that you used to work at, they didn't have a budget for marketing, wouldn't they see it as an investment instead of as I guess this is almost like another employee, basically?
Yeah, that's a great question. So the companies that understand the value of marketing definitely do see it as an investment. But the challenge with a startup, especially if they're not like a VC backed or funded startup, is that sometimes they just literally don't have the budget. Like, even if they did believe in it fully and they wanted to leverage it, sometimes they just don't even have it. Like, they don't have the money to spend. And I've always been in a position where I've had to think very strategically about how I've spent those marketing dollars, and at least in the companies that I've worked with in the past, I've actually been able to achieve quite a bit just from organic results, you know, and not necessarily have to think about putting a whole bunch of money into ads. But absolutely, the companies that once they do have a bit of budget, they start putting money into ads, they have someone, you know, who's managing the process and really tweaking and optimizing it and seeing the results, then it's usually one of those things that starts to scale, right? Like as soon as you start to see results and you prove it out, then companies are much more willing to put more money into it. But usually the bootstrapped companies that have like no money to begin with, they're not usually able to even start with paid ads, even if they wanted to. Now, that said, what I will add to that is, you know, with companies like Clearbank coming online and offering the ability to help companies out with that, it might be becoming a bit more easier for them to justify that. But I mean, even Clearbank is a loan to put into your ads. So it's challenging. It's a challenging thing for some companies. But I do think you're right. Like I think the company itself needs to view it as an investment. Yeah, because if they don't view it as an investment, you're not going to go very far with it at all. Hello, Nate.
I'll let you unmute.
There we go. Now I'm
Hi.
unmuted. Hi. Thanks a lot for putting this on, Aaron.
Yeah,
Really
no worries.
appreciate it. I have it's a SaaS-based system for like B2B with residential construction companies.
Yeah.
And it's a higher ticket item for one. So it's, you know, more like $200 a month kind of thing.
Yeah.
And they're not a sharing type community. Whenever they get an advantage, they want to keep it to themselves.
Yep.
But is there any different kind of strategies or things I should be doing with something like a higher ticket item like that?
Yeah, for sure. So, I mean, I'm assuming that so you're not necessarily selling into like the enterprise or anything. It's just that the product that you have is just a high price point.
I mean, yeah, $200 a month. Like
Yeah.
I said, it's for residential construction companies. So.
Right. Yeah, so I think, I mean, there's a lot of different things that you could honestly think about doing. With the way that I would approach that is, and this is going to be a bit challenging because I don't know the residential construction industry as well as you would. But the way that I would probably approach that is I would think about, and actually, let me ask you a question. Can you tell me a little bit about the platform that you have for them?
Sure. So what it does is that it basically cuts down their paperwork time by like 75%.
Oh, okay.
So if it took them 100 hours, it now takes them about 20 hours. And it just helps manage all of the little nitty gritty stuff that they used to have to do manually.
Yeah. And who's your like typical buyer inside of the organization? I mean,
usually the owner of the company.
okay.
So typically owners are involved in all construction companies. Construction companies start off somewhere between 1 and 5 employees.
Yeah.
And then they kind of skip over between 6 and 12 employees because it's just, you can't function in there. And 13 to 25 employees is kind of the next general. Like it normally doesn't get much bigger than 25.
Yeah.
I have sold into like, there's 150 employee company, but they're rare. There just aren't very many of them.
And do you find that it's more likely that it's the middle group of people that are more likely to need a service like yours, or are they needing it even at the very beginning?
They're all desperate for this. Yeah.
Okay.
They're just, so it's not hard to get it to them, be honest. It's once I put it in front of them, they usually just kind of go, holy crap, it's something different. Yay. Cause everything else is basically just a paper process that's been pushed up into the cloud, which doesn't save us any time.
And what do you find is the biggest objection that they have to not purchasing?
Well, it's been mostly that I haven't been ready until now-ish. I'm still going to there's still some things I have to fix. Yeah. But the biggest objection that happens is that everyone wants their own custom little thing. Right. Like they're used to, no, I measure my things this way, or my PDFs look like this, or there's always like things that they're just stuck in because there's never been a consistent way of doing paperwork for construction companies. It's always been like they just all take it, like they just kind of figure it out as they go. And so they get stuck on their own little nuances and intricacies.
Yeah. So I think like just based on what you're saying, I think there's a few things. So if you haven't thought of this already, I might actually encourage you to think about potentially adding professional services attached to your software. So like for those that do want that more custom, the custom features, custom elements, like maybe you could be able to service that market and reduce their objections there if you offered the ability to actually build that, but on a fee, professional services fee. So that could be just one thing that's not really like marketing related, but just something else. So one of the things you said in there that was really interesting to me was that you said that when they see it, they often hit that aha moment, right? They're often like, whoa, oh my gosh, I need this. And so I think from your perspective on marketing, I think everything you do should be to help people get to that aha moment as fast as possible. And if you can do that through videos, video demos, webinars, any way that people can see the product and actually hear you describe the value, I think that would be potentially a really great way to do that. Even in your ads, if you're doing like paid ads at all, they could be video-based ads, and the videos literally could really showcase the software and the solutions and the benefits. And then I would love to, feel free to email me after, but I'd love for you to send me your website as well, because I'd love to just see the website and see if like there's not somewhere that they might be getting hung up on. Maybe it's more feature focused, less benefits focused. So
a big part of it is that I've been really kind of careful, because if it's not working right, I don't want to jump in and get a whole bunch of people on board. So it's, I've been kind of in stealth mode. So I think it's time to start opening up the gates though.
Yeah. Well, one thing I'll say, if you're kind of in stealth mode, in the stealth mode process, one thing you could do is you could start building some initial anticipation by literally just building a one-page landing page, let's say, having an opt-in on that, and then just like seeding some ads to the construction industry that says like a better way to deal with paperwork is coming. Like obviously I'm spitballing. I would definitely tweak that. But, and then start to generate some leads so that when you are ready to release it, you actually have this like early beta test group that you can at least roll it out to slowly.
Thank you. I really appreciate
no worries.
that.
No
That's
problem.
awesome.
Sorry, I see that a few more people have their hands raised. So let's go to Emmanuel first. I'll let you unmute.
Hey, sorry, how are you?
Good, how are you? I like your chair.
Thank you.
Is it a gaming chair?
It is a gaming chair, yeah.
I love it. I have one in my other office, very similar.
It comes in handy for sitting here all day.
Yeah.
I actually was just going to touch on what you said to Nate, because I am in professional services group. So that's what we do. We implement projects for between ERPs and e-commerce platforms. So I was just going to touch on that for a second, how you said. And Nate, how Aaron said, if you offer like the vanilla product, and then anything after that will be totally a higher source of revenue for you to drive in through professional services. Because I know for what we do, it's a bigger ticket item. I said any piece that requires the word custom, it's just market right away. So I want to say, yeah, she is like perfect advice. And I definitely want to get in touch with you, Aaron, and possibly Nate, just to get a little more idea of what's happening and want to expand where I am in my career too. So yeah, thanks for the presentation too.
Yeah, no worries. Thank you.
Thanks.
I appreciate that. You're like the perfect hype person. I swear I didn't orchestrate that in the chat or anything. And my last question for you before you drop off mute is, so if you have a gaming chair, do you play any video games?
I'm going to disappoint all of you and say, no, I don't.
Oh no. Okay. I was just curious because I play a lot of games.
Not yet. I used to, but not now. No.
Okay.
I feel
That's all right. I won't hold that against you.
Thank you.
That's fine. Thank you.
So next up, we've got Olivia with a question.
Yeah, awesome. Thank you. And thank you, Aaron. It's been such an insightful session, especially as someone who's an aspiring founder. I think this is super critical and important information for all founders to kind of take away. So thank you so much.
Thank you.
And Yeah, thank you. And I think my question centers around, I feel like ever since Clubhouse has come out, and I know podcasting has been really big as of late, and you touched upon podcasting a little bit. In terms of growth marketing, like what does the, I guess, future or the immediate future look like for like audio-based growth marketing? Because I know radio was considered dead a while ago, but then podcasting kind of took over, and now mediums like a Clubhouse and even Spaces that Twitter is planning to launch, I think that's changing a lot of the landscape. So what are your thoughts around that?
Yeah, great question. And I actually just got access to Twitter Spaces, so I'm so excited.
Oh,
Not,
nice.
I'm not trying to sound like a brag, like that's not a brag or anything. It's just like I'm super stoked because I think it's like a really interesting platform. And yeah, I've hosted my first space, and it was actually really fun. We talked a lot about moose talk on TikTok. That's what we ended up talking about. It was very odd. But anyway, so your question about what's the future of audio look like from a growth marketing perspective? I think honestly, the jury is still out a little bit on, what it's going to mean for the future. I think podcasts, we've identified their value in the market. We realize that they're fantastic for, building a halo effect around your brand, meaning if you want to build brand credibility, what better way than to host a podcast and have these incredible guests on? We did it at Fellow. I launched a podcast while I was still there, secured guests like the CEO of, who did we have on the podcast? We had the CEO of Drift, David Cancel. We had Canadian Dragon, Michelle Romanoff. Had a bunch of Guy Kawasaki, who's like a marketing legend, kind of old now, so not everyone knows who that is, but anyway, so podcasts are great for like the halo effect. They definitely can help build a lot of credibility around your brand, thought leadership, all that. But I think from a monetization or acquisition perspective, there's no doubt that having a podcast is definitely a great way to boost that brand visibility, which naturally will help with acquisition. But I don't think we figured out like a direct line. It's not as simple as like when we do a Facebook ad and we link it to a landing page and then there's a conversion element. Podcasting is still like a gray space. If someone's listening to an audio, it's a little harder to like convert them. Like, sure, you can say in the thing like, go to, blah to get whatever, but then they still have to take another action. And you're going to lose a lot of people on that process. So I think it's still TBD. Clubhouse is, for those of you that have been playing with it, it's an interesting platform. Like I said when I was chatting earlier, I liked it a lot more in the beginning. I feel like there's a lot of how to be a millionaire rooms now, and just some really weird conversations going on. A lot of like ego is getting built into the platform right now. People are becoming Clubhouse stars, and it's like, I've seen this before. It happened on Twitter. It happened on Instagram. Like it happens everywhere. But I still don't think that they figured out the business use case beyond brand visibility and potentially community building. Like I think it's also great for like gathering your community. So I think it's like a soft acquisition channel, but nothing direct yet.
Got it. Awesome. Thank you so much, Jen. Really appreciate it.
Yeah, no worries. And that's just my opinion, by the way. I'm sure there's others that have very different opinions than I, but it's just what I'm seeing right now.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
So I will let Graziano go next, and then we'll take some questions from the chat.
Sure.
Thank you. Hi, Erin. Thanks for the great presentation today.
Yeah, you're welcome.
I'm glad you brought the example of Tinder. And it's not like I'm a fan of Tinder. It's not about that, but it's more about, I would love to hear your advice on how people launch marketplaces, because Tinder is a kind of marketplace where it's very localized. So I'm, for example, located in Toronto, and if I go on Tinder and there's nobody in Toronto, I would just, uninstall the app.
Yeah.
And like you say, it's like it's not scalable to just go in campus and just go, giving flyers and help people install the app. So, and the tricky part with marketplaces like that, you need a lot of people at the same time in the same location. And at the beginning, you don't have much money to do a lot of marketing, like to pay for marketing.
Mm-hmm.
So even if you do try to do organic marketing and creating content, let's say on Instagram or even LinkedIn or Facebook, it targets, the the entire planet, and you would prefer to have, city by city just to get started. So yeah, it would be interesting to hear, like, if you have any recommendation on how marketplaces get so famous without, putting so much money into it.
Yeah, it's a great question. And the first thing I will say is, thankfully now with all of your ads, Facebook, Google, LinkedIn, et cetera, you can actually get really specific, including down to the city. So just for what that's worth, you can't, like, that is possible. Building a marketplace though, especially obviously a marketplace is typically double-sided. So that means you have like two sides and you have to fill supply and demand on both. It's hard. Like, this is not an easy feat, and it's why it's not that not a lot of marketplaces succeed. There are tons of marketplaces, but they're really difficult. I haven't been in a position where I've personally had to grow from the ground floor up a marketplace. I've typically come into marketplaces, and so I've had the small benefit of them already having launched. So I would say if there's anyone in the room right now that has that experience, would think, definitely chime in. I don't have all of the answers for sure, but what I will say is that there's one example that I'm thinking about, and I can't remember exactly the name of it. I think it was something like Next Door, or it was some sort of neighborhood oriented like basically a neighborhood group that you could create, for your neighborhood. And then you would be like the owner of it. I think it was called Next Door, or anyway, they handed out postcards, and I got a postcard in the mail, and it was kind of like, hey, you should be your neighborhood's, I forget, they even had a fancy name for it. But what they did was really interesting. So it doesn't matter what they're called. I'll find it later. But what they did was kind of neat in that Next Door. Thank you. I was like, it's something actually, I think that might have been what I said. You can tell it's getting to the end of the day. Anyway, so this company, what they basically did is they went out and they found the person that could almost champion the local marketplace on their own. And they waited until there was enough of a groundswell or enough demand from a specific neighborhood before they actually launched the neighborhood, if that makes sense. It worked for them because they're like a social network for neighborhoods. So it was kind of like a little different. But I think the key thing that I thought was interesting was that they literally targeted in on potentially even one individual that could kind of help be the amplifier or have the network effect. But I think marketplaces are hard. So like I said, if there's anyone in the room that's like a marketplace expert, you've scaled marketplaces, definitely chime in. And I'm also happy to grab some other examples for you as well, from some of my marketing colleagues that have done that.
Awesome, thank you.
Yeah.
So I think what we'll do now is go to a few questions that I see in the chat. So first question comes from David. Have you used any AI tools for marketing?
This is actually a great question. I was just talking about this with a client today. I have a client who's really nerdy into tools, tries everything, and he was asking me the same question: if I've tried any of these AI platforms that copy test for you, or write copy for you, or sort of dynamically do your A/B tests. Admittedly, no. I'm a little old school, to be completely honest. It's not to say that I'm not going to get my mind changed once I actually start to experiment with these different tools, but I'm a little bit the main premise of all of the things that I do from a marketing perspective is it needs to be very human and very emotionally connected to the audience that I serve. As a result, I'm very focused on things like, creating content that the customer actually wants, building communities, building brands that have a strong why or a strong vision around what they do, or a mission. As a result, using an AI tool to do some of those marketing activities, not necessarily on the testing side, but on the content creation side, feels a little far removed from the knowledge that I would have about the customer and having their words in my head. But just full disclaimer, like I said, I haven't actually tried them. So I probably should, maybe I'd be pleasantly surprised. But I don't know, marketing for me is such an intimate thing. And I literally use customers' words in copy. And I don't know, I can't imagine an AI tool could do that yet.
Yeah, I'm glad you said that, because I'm kind of like, AI is kind of like taking over the world in all these different aspects, and it's so good to hear that marketing is one area that it may not do that in.
Hopefully, I think it's really good when people do it.
Yeah. So we have another question from Ankit. As a startup founder, there are so many aspects to work on. What percentage of time do you recommend a person spend on marketing related activities?
Oh, well, I mean, I'm a little biased in that I would say, a lot of time should go to marketing. But I think honestly, like I've spent a lot of time in the accelerator space working with startups. The one thing they're always, I would say delayed on is their marketing. A lot of folks think like everything needs to be ready, it needs to be perfect, it needs to be like ready for people to use it before they'll even talk about it. And I think that this is like a bit of a mistake, because here's what happens when you build in secret or you build in your bubble. I know what you're worried about, right? You're worried that people are going to steal the ideas, or that your competitors will catch wind of it and release it before you get a chance to. I get all of that. There's a lot of fear. But at the same time, if you think about this from an emotional perspective with your audience is like over here, right? They don't know you exist yet. They're doing their thing. They have another way to solve the problem that you're going to solve for them. So you're building over here and you're in love with your problem. You love this company more than anything. You think it's like the best thing ever, and it probably is. And then you take it to the market after you've been building it in secret. You take it to the market, and then you're like, here I am, and nothing happens. And it's the most disheartening thing ever, because now nobody loves your baby, and you just think it's the greatest thing. And so the thing I would say is that if startups can put more emphasis on marketing early on, similar to what I was saying to Nate earlier about even creating a landing page to start to like collect interest in what you're building. You don't have to give away the full formula or even tell them what you're doing, but just like seeding the interest with people, building a relationship with them, getting the community hyped up. These are all things startups could be doing way before they actually do them. I see so many startups just like, they're here and then they're here. And then all of a sudden when they're over here with the market, they're just so disappointed because people aren't buying. So I know that doesn't answer the like what percentage question, but what I would say is like do it earlier than you think you should. Find ways to bring people along for that journey, get them invested, get them involved, get them excited about what you're building, so that when you launch and when you're ready, you have these people who are already just as in love with the idea as you are. That's like my favorite thing to do with startups, is get them there sooner.
So I see another question from Anna. So Anna's wondering, where did you learn all this awesome info about marketing techniques, and how do you stay up to date with the latest marketing capabilities of platforms? Because there's so many out there.
Yeah, I mean, so here's the thing, like I'll say I'm not always up to date on everything. Sometimes what I do actually find really helpful is there's a hashtag on Twitter called Marketing Twitter. There's a great group of people who tweet inside of that hashtag. You literally just can go search it. There's not like a club to join or anything. You just follow along with those tweets. Marketing Twitter has been really helpful because usually it's a bunch of smart marketers who are all talking about, trends in tech and everything else. I find that pretty useful. Marketing Twitter also has a Slack channel. So it's free. You can just join it. I find that useful as well. I'm a member of probably 4 different marketing oriented Slack channels where I'm constantly just kind of like keeping an ear to the ground. And so I think those things help, like being immersed in the marketing community. But it's also about being playful and experimenting on your own too. I have I spend a lot of time on my personal brand, like a lot of time. If any of you know me and you follow me on social, and as a result, like as part of just like, wanting to bring value to my network as well, I'm often reading or experimenting or playing or trying with new tools. Like I said, just literally 3 minutes before this call, I tweeted out because I wanted to get an invite to Dispo, which is this app. It doesn't even look like an app, really. I mean, I think that's a little hard to see, but anyway, apparently it's some sort of photo sharing app with a disposable camera aesthetic. But I just tweeted out to marketing Twitter. I was like, hey, does anyone have an invite? I want in. I want to play with this thing. I want to see what it's about. So I think it's like curiosity combined with just like having a bit of an experimental mindset yourself. And then if you have a personal brand that you can play with and try these things out on that isn't related to your business, all the better. Because then you can just go to town. I do everything on my personal brand.
So I see we've hit the 8 o'clock mark. Erin, are you okay to take a few more questions?
Sure.
Okay.
Let's go.
Because I'm just having a look at the chat and I see the questions keep coming in. So
yeah, no worries.
Okay, so next question is from Vivian. Would you say it's better to focus on social media marketing or more on things like SEO, website marketing? As a 16-year-old marketing small business owner, I find my budget is small and I've mainly focused on Instagram and TikTok.
Yeah, that's a great question. So it really honestly depends on your business, I think. I think, you know, like I spend a lot of time on TikTok. I'm in DIY TikTok. I'm in small business TikTok. I'm seeing all of these amazing creators share their stuff on the platform, and they're generating a ton of business from TikTok and Instagram alone. And I think if you can do that and you don't need to have like a full-blown website right now, great, you know. At the same time, eventually, you know, I mean, thankfully, TikTok is still vastly growing, so I don't think you'll run out of prospects there anytime soon. But, you know, a platform like Instagram, for example, you know, if it dies and if it goes to the wayside like Facebook did, we'll say did. The one challenge that you'll have if you're doubling down only on TikTok and Instagram is that if those platforms go away, your entire business goes away. And so being fully reliant on platforms that you don't own is actually really risky. So what I would say is helpful is if you can, you know, even if you have a one-page website, or depending on what you're selling, maybe you have a Shopify store, for example, and even if you just have like a mailing list, a simple mailing list where people can like, I see a lot of creators do this where they actually create a lot of, not FOMO, I guess it's kind of like FOMO. So they'll say like, there's only limited quantities of this thing, and I'm going to send out the notice through my mailing list, and they'll encourage people to get on there. That can be a really great way to at least build something that you own without having to put a lot of time and effort into the content marketing and SEO side. However, the last thing I'll say is if you do invest in SEO and content early, that like I was saying in the during the talk, like that has a compounding effect over time. Like your content will only do more for you the longer it's like in the search engines, and SEO will only build with you over time. So the earlier you start doing those things, the better. But if you have to pick and choose, keep with TikTok and Instagram if it's working, but build that one-page site with a mailing list so that you don't lose every single person that follows you should those platforms go away tomorrow.
Really good advice. So I'm just going to take 2 more questions from the chat and then we will finalize this session. But the next question comes from Alina. Any recommendations on how to simplify content strategy and building a community? I really overthink and dread the writing process and don't end up writing articles or social media posts.
Yeah. Okay. I actually don't love writing either. I mean, okay, I take it back. I do. I just don't have time to write as much as I'd love. So I've actually developed a little system that I'll share with you. And I'm going to share, like I said, that content marketing flywheel deck that I, from a talk I gave yesterday. Happy to just share it out. Obviously, you won't have the context around it, but I write the decks pretty clear so they can kind of be like a guide as well. However, here's my system. So I don't have a lot of time, but I really want to make sure that I produce new content every week that's really valuable for my audience. Speaking specifically about my personal brand here, this applies to business as well. So what I personally do is I do a YouTube video. So I record the video. It's typically about 6 minutes long, maybe somewhere between 6 and 10 minutes. I focus on something that my community has already asked me. Maybe it's a common question. If I'm stuck and have nothing, I usually go to Quora, Quora.com. I look to see what the trending or most popular questions are, and then I create a video about that. So I create the video, and then using otter.ai. So I actually take it back. I do use an AI tool. I just realized it's not really AI though. But anyway, so I use Otter to transcribe the video. So I just upload the video it spits out within an hour or so a full transcript. And then I take that transcript and then I turn that into a blog post. So I just have to do some minor editing to it. I turn that into a post. I usually embed the YouTube video in there as well in case people prefer that as a medium. And then I further chunk that down into social media posts, like the copy from the video, into social posts. I break the video down into social posts as well, but from a video perspective. And then I also take that same content and modify it ever so slightly for TikTok. So I'll create a very short version of what I've talked about in the video for TikTok as well. So even if you hate writing, there are other ways around it. And transcribing like audio or video is a really, really great way to do that without having to spend the time like sitting and crafting the perfect, kind of SEO style post. The final thing I'll say, and look at it, every time I get super excited, it's a combination of like excitement and talking too fast, just makes me want to pass out on the floor every time. But the final thing I'll say is don't write for SEO. This is something I see a lot of people do. Yes, you want to at some point when your company is like requiring the large amounts of traffic, you do want to have some very SEO rich posts. But in the beginning, don't write for SEO. Just write for your audience. Write like you speak, write like you talk, write things that people are going to want to share. And naturally, they're going to have some keywords in them because, it's not like you're just talking in words like the, but, and. Like you will have words and they are keywords. And so don't write for SEO because that's boring. Nobody wants to do that. Instead, record yourself, film yourself, and transcribe that.
That's such a great idea. I never even knew that you could do that. So what a great tip for everyone. Last question I'm going to take is, can marketing when you have an MVP hurt your brand?
That's a great question. So no, as long as you communicate out to people the stage you're in without saying like, hey, this is day one on the market. Like you definitely don't want to be like, take a chance, we're great. But what I've seen most people do, and Fellow did this too, and this is like public knowledge, so I can it's not like I'm sharing a trade secret or anything, but what Fellow did is they actually built their MVP. They stayed in stealth mode, but at the same time, they found one key customer, in this case, it was Shopify, that they could work with the product, deploy it out to Shopify, like organization-wide, use that as a base. And everybody inside of Shopify, was told when it was deployed, like, hey, this is an early MVP. We're collecting feedback. It's going to be a great tool. Here are the things it's going to do. But like, let's really get this early feedback and iterate on the product. They did that in such a way that like, obviously that didn't hurt their brand because, it's new. Then when they came out of stealth, they made a big deal out of that. Like, it was like, hey, the product's here, it's launched. Here's the future vision for the product, but here's where we're at today. But they made sure that at least the core base of like the core functionality of the product was solid. Like you don't want to come out with like your core functionality broken. I think you really need to come out with something strong. Another great example just this week, one of my friends is working at a company called Maple, and Maple is like a family app, family platform. They just released, their first MVP out this week, but they did the whole thing where leading up to that, they drove people to a wait list. They said that it was going to be a beta release. They were very clear in communicating that, but they at least made sure that the core functionality, even though it's super basic right now, it's super light, they just made sure it works really well. So I think just communicate it really, really well. Don't pretend that it is something it isn't. And don't come out saying that it's like got all these bells and whistles if it doesn't, and start small. You can always add more features to your product as you go. You cannot walk back broken features though, like cannot. If a customer comes in and has a terrible experience on your app, they're going to just remember the terrible experience. But if they come in and it's light on features, it's not going to be bad. It may be a little like underwhelming, but it won't be bad. So I think just like under promise, over deliver, communicate well, build a wait list, operate in stealth if you want, do beta groups, or do invites like Dispo and Clubhouse, so that you can like bring people in on a slower roll. than all at once.
Thank you so much for that, Erin. Lots of valuable tips and information for all of our attendees. So I really want to thank you for really taking your time to deliver this presentation and give all your insights and all the wonderful examples. Thank you so much. I see tons of comments in here about your energy and a lot of people wondering how you have so much energy it's past 8 o'clock here. I'm not sure where everyone else is joining us from, but
thank you. It's fine. I just like when I talk and I get so excited, I literally almost pass out. Like I have to stop and like remind myself to breathe.
No, definitely your passion shows, and it shows that you really enjoy what you're doing.
Yeah, it's awesome.
It's been really great. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank all of you. Like all of you showed up, you gave your time, you're here. I think it's great. I love the questions. So honestly, like, thank you an equal amount because I would talk to nobody if all of you weren't here. So this is amazing.
And we will definitely share the additional resource with everyone as well by email. We'll also be sending out a survey link. So if you can just let us know how we did today, any suggestions for improvement, that would be appreciated. And we will also be sharing the YouTube link. So this session is recorded. We'll be sharing the link for that. That will be posted on the WiseSpace YouTube page next week. I also do want to remind you that we do have our next, our tech accelerator. So applications are actually extended. So we've extended the application deadline for that. Hopefully you can all see my screen here. So that is now this Sunday, February 28th. So if you do have a tech startup, we do encourage you to apply. It's a really, really great 4-month program that we offer. So we'll link the website for that as well. You have until Sunday now to apply for that. I also do want to remind you that next week we are continuing with the series. So we've got a great session on legal basics for entrepreneurs. I know we've gotten tons of questions actually throughout the series on different legal aspects of developing your startup. So that would be a really, really great session to attend. And that is at the same time. So we're starting again at a regular time at 6 p.m. Thank you guys so much for attending. Erin, thank you again for your time. And we hope to see you all again next week. Take care, everyone.